The lights dimmed. The crowd held its breath. Alan Jackson, the voice behind Chattahoochee and Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning, the legend who sold over 75 million records, just stepped off the stage for the last time. His body is failing him. His final roadshow is over. But how does a man who once carried audiences across the world suddenly lose the ability to stand? What does it mean when the very nerves that powered his music are slowly dying? The answer is Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a cruel, inherited condition that has been stealing his strength for over a decade. There is no cure, no treatment, only the relentless march toward silence. This is the untold story of Alan Jackson, the battles no one saw, the courage behind the music, and the devastating truth of why one of the greatest country voices of our time has gone quiet. The disease they kept secret. The applause roared. The lights blinded. But behind the microphone, behind the legendary voice that defined a generation, Alan Jackson was fighting a battle no one could see. For years, fans noticed the stumbles, the tremors, the moments when his body betrayed him mid-song. Was it age, a bad night, or something far darker? This is a story about what you hide and what you finally reveal. It's about the difference between a stumble and a battle. Alan Jackson kept a devastating secret from his fans for 10 years, not out of shame, but out of a fear that the truth would be mistaken for a lie. This is the disease they kept secret. The internet is filled with speculation. Some said he was drinking. Others whispered that age had finally caught up with the 66-year-old legend. But the truth was far more devastating than any rumor. In 2011, Alan Jackson received a diagnosis that would change everything. Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a name most people have never heard, a condition that destroys lives in slow motion. The disease attacks the peripheral nerves, the pathways that connect your brain and spine to your arms and legs. Over time, those nerves die. The muscles they control begin to waste away. Walking becomes difficult. Balance becomes impossible. Simple tasks like holding a guitar pick or gripping a microphone become daily battles. Alan did not tell the world. For 10 years, he carried this burden in silence. He watched his father suffer from the same condition. He watched his grandmother decline. He knew exactly what was coming for him because he had seen it destroy the people he loved most. But he kept touring. I kept recording, kept standing on stages across America, hiding the tremors, masking the stumbles, refusing to let the disease define him. When he finally revealed his diagnosis in 2021, sitting across from Jenna Bush Hager on the Today Show, the words came slowly, painfully. He admitted that the disease had been affecting him for years, that it was getting more and more obvious, that he knew he was stumbling around on stage, that he felt uncomfortable because he could not control his own body anymore. But the admission that cut deepest was this. He said he did not want people to think he was drunk. For a decade, every time he lost his balance, every time his legs gave out, he worried that fans and critics were judging him, that they thought the man who had built his legacy on authenticity and honesty was putting on an act. The truth was so much worse. His body was betraying him in ways no amount of willpower could overcome. The medical reality is brutal. Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease has no cure. There are no medications that can stop its progression. Physical therapy can slow the decline, but nothing can reverse it. The nerves that die do not regenerate. The muscles that wither do not rebuild. Alan Jackson knew all of this when he announced his last call tour in 2022. He knew that every show could be his last, that the disease was progressing faster than anyone wanted to admit. that the man who had spent 35 years commanding stages might not be able to stand for much longer. On May 8, 2025, just 9 days before his final roadshow, Alan Jackson took the stage at the Academy of Country Music Awards. He performed "Remember When," a song about looking back on a life well lived. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Fans watching at home broke down in tears. Jelly Roll, sitting in the audience, posted that he was freaking out just being near his hero. But those who watched closely saw what the cameras tried to hide. His gait was unsteady. His balance was failing. His hands could hold the guitar, but could no longer play it the way they once did. When he stepped to the microphone in Milwaukee on May 17th, everyone in that arena knew they were witnessing history. Alan Jackson told the crowd he was winding down, that this was his last roadshow, that he was so blessed and grateful for everyone who had supported his music. He promised one final concert, a big finale in Nashville, where it all started. The date is set for June 27, 2026. Luke Bryan, Eric Church, Luke Combs, Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, and a dozen other superstars will join him on stage at Nissan Stadium. It will be the end of an era, the final note of a career that changed country music forever. But to understand what we are losing, you have to understand where Alan Jackson came from. You have to know the story of a small-town Georgia boy who had nothing but a dream and a borrowed connection to Glenn Campbell. You have to feel the weight of 35 years of hits, heartbreak, and history. Because Alan Jackson was never just a singer. He was the last guardian of traditional country music. And when his voice goes silent, something irreplaceable goes with it. The boy from Newnan. Newnan, Georgia, in the 1960s was not a place that produced superstars. It was a small town where people worked hard, went to church on Sundays, and measured success by whether you could keep food on the table and a roof over your head. Alan Eugene Jackson was born there on October 17, 1958, the youngest of 5 children and the only boy. His father, Joseph Eugene Jackson, worked in a Ford dealership. His mother, Ruth Music Jackson, raised 5 kids in a house so small that young Alan's bed sat in the hallway because there was no room anywhere else. They were not poor in the way that makes for dramatic stories. They were poor in the quiet way that millions of American families understood. There was always enough, but never extra. Dreams were luxuries they could not afford to indulge. Music found Alan early, not through lessons or formal training, through the radio, through the records his parents played, through the sounds that drifted out of honky-tonks and church halls across small-town Georgia. He heard Hank Williams singing about loneliness and understood something about the human heart that school could never teach. He heard George Jones and Merle Haggard and knew that country music was not just entertainment. It was testimony. It was working people telling the truth about their lives in 3-minute songs. By 12, Alan had his first job, working in a shoe store to earn pocket money. By his teenage years, he was writing songs of his own, scribbling lyrics in notebooks, teaching himself guitar on instruments borrowed from friends and family. He had no connections to Nashville, no mentor to show him the way. Just a burning certainty that music was what he was meant to do. Then came Denise, the girl who would become his wife, his partner, his anchor through everything that followed. They met when they were teenagers, 2 kids from the same small town who found something in each other that neither could explain. They married in 1979 when Alan was just 20 years old. They had no money, no plan beyond the dream that somehow, someday, Alan would make it in country music. For 8 years, that dream remained exactly that, a dream. Alan worked odd jobs. He sang in local bands. He sent demo tapes to Nashville and received rejection letters in return. The music industry did not want another unknown singer from a small Georgia town. Nashville had plenty of talent already. What could Alan Jackson possibly offer that they did not already have? The break came through Denise. In 1985, she was working as a flight attendant when she encountered Glenn Campbell at an airport. Campbell was already a legend, a crossover superstar who had bridged the gap between country and pop. Denise gathered her courage and approached him. She told him about her husband, about his songs, about his voice. Campbell listened, and more importantly, he helped. He connected Alan with his management team. Doors that had been locked for years suddenly began to crack open. By 1989, Alan Jackson had signed with Arista Nashville. His debut album, Here in the Real World, arrived in 1990. The title track climbed to number 3 on the country charts. Critics noticed something different about this newcomer. He was not chasing trends. He was not trying to be the next Garth Brooks or the next anything. He was mining a vein of traditional country that the industry had largely abandoned in its rush toward pop crossover success. Alan Jackson sounded like the past, and somehow that made him the future. The rise of a traditional revolutionary. The 1990s belonged to Alan Jackson. Album after album, hit after hit, he proved that traditional country music could compete with anything Nashville threw at the public. Don't Rock the Jukebox arrived in 1991, spawning 5 #1 singles including the title track. A witty plea to keep country music on the jukebox instead of rock and roll. The song became an anthem for fans who felt the genre was losing its identity. Alan Jackson was not just making music, he was making a statement. Then came A Lot About Livin' and a Little About Love. In 1992, the album was a commercial juggernaut, eventually selling over 6 million copies. But one song stood above the rest. Chattahoochee exploded onto country radio in 1993 and never really left. The song was pure joy, a celebration of growing up in small-town America, of summer nights by the river, of learning about life and love in the places that big city sophisticates would never understand. Alan Jackson wrote Chattahoochee with Jim McBride, and he almost did not release it as a single. He worried that nobody outside Georgia would know what the Chattahoochee River was. He worried the song was too regional, too specific, too rooted in a particular place and time. But that specificity was exactly what made it universal. Every listener heard their own river in those lyrics, their own summer nights, their own coming-of-age story. Chattahoochee spent 4 weeks at #1. It won CMA Awards for Single of the Year, Song of the Year, and Music Video of the Year. The image of Alan Jackson water skiing in red cowboy boots became iconic. And suddenly, the traditional country singer from Newnan, Georgia, was one of the biggest stars in music. The hits kept coming. Livin' on Love celebrated his marriage to Denise, the partnership that had sustained him through the lean years. Gone Country poked fun at the trend of pop stars and rock musicians trying to cash in on the country's commercial success. Drive for Daddy Gene was a heartbreaking tribute to his father, who passed away in 2000. And then came September 11th, 2001. Like everyone else, Alan Jackson watched in horror as the towers fell. But unlike most people, he responded the only way he knew how. He wrote a song. Where Were You? When the World Stopped Turning was not a patriotic anthem. It was not a call to war. It was something far more powerful. It was confusion and grief and faith and doubt, all woven together in a melody that somehow captured what millions of Americans were feeling but could not express. The song became his biggest crossover hit, reaching the top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. It won the CMA Award for Song of the Year. It established Alan Jackson as more than a country singer. He was a voice for America in its darkest hour. By 2003, It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere had become an inescapable summer anthem, a duet with Jimmy Buffett that proved Alan Jackson could have fun without abandoning his roots. By 2003, Remember When had become one of the most requested wedding songs in the country, a nostalgic ballad about growing old with the person you love. By 2017, Alan Jackson was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Loretta Lynn herself presenting the honor. His acceptance speech was characteristically humble. He had sold over 75 million records. He had earned 2 Grammy Awards, 16 CMA Awards, and 17 ACM Awards. He had written or co-written most of his own hits, a rarity in an industry increasingly dominated by professional songwriters. He had done it all while staying true to the traditional country sound that Nashville had nearly abandoned. And through all of it, a disease was slowly destroying him from the inside out. The secret battle. Looking back, the signs were there. Alan Jackson had always been a private person, preferring the quiet life on his sprawling Tennessee estate to the glitter of Nashville's social scene. He and Denise had weathered storms that would have destroyed lesser marriages. A brief separation in the late 1990s that they rarely discuss. The deaths of both their parents. The challenge of raising 3 daughters in the spotlight while trying to give them a normal life. But the disease was the heaviest burden of all. Alan inherited Charcot-Marie-Tooth from his father. The same father he had honored in Drive for Daddy Jean. The same father whose death in 2000 had left a hole in his life that nothing could fill. When Alan received his own diagnosis in 2011, he knew exactly what it meant. He had watched his father decline, he had watched his grandmother struggle. He understood that his future held the same fate. For 10 years, he told no one outside his closest circle. He continued touring, pushing through the pain, hiding the symptoms behind professionalism and stagecraft. When his balance faltered, he blamed it on age. When his hands trembled, he adjusted his guitar technique. When walking became difficult, he minimized his movement on stage. The show always went on, but the price was enormous. Every performance became a battle against his own body. Every tour became a test of how much longer he could hide the truth. His 2022 announcement of the Last Call tour was not a retirement. It was an acknowledgement that time was running out. The tour title itself was a message. One more for the road. One last chance to see the legend before the legend could no longer perform. The 2025 ACM Awards performance revealed what words could not convey. When Alan Jackson sang "Remember When" to that packed arena, his voice was still there. The emotion was still there, but his body was visibly struggling. His gait was unsteady. His hands gripped the guitar more for support than for playing. The standing ovation that followed was not just appreciation for a great performance, it was grief. The audience was watching a man say goodbye in real time. 9 days later, in Milwaukee, he made it official. "This is my last roadshow." The man who had given country music Chattahoochee and Where Were You and Don't Rock the Jukebox was done touring. The road that had carried him to every corner of America for 35 years had finally reached its end. The final curtain. The announcement hit Nashville like a thunderclap. Social media exploded with tributes, memories, and tears. Fans who had grown up with his music realized they would never again see him command a stage the way he once did. Fellow artists posted their own stories of what Alan Jackson had meant to them. Luke Bryan called him the reason he fell in love with country music. Eric Church credited him with showing what authenticity looked like in an industry that often forgot. Carrie Underwood said that country music would not be the same without him. But Alan Jackson himself remained characteristically humble. He thanked his fans for supporting his music. He said he was living the American dream. He promised that one final show would bring it all to a close. June 27, 2026, Nissan Stadium in Nashville. The final concert has already sold out. The lineup reads like a who's who of modern country music. Luke Bryan, Eric Church, Luke Combs, Riley Green, Cody Johnson, Miranda Lambert, John Party, Carrie Underwood, Keith Urban, Lee Ann Womack. All of them coming together to celebrate the man who proved that traditional country could still dominate the charts, that you could honor the past while shaping the future. That authenticity would always resonate more deeply than any trend. It will be more than a concert. It will be a coronation, a farewell, a moment when Nashville pauses to acknowledge what it is losing. Because here is the truth that no one wants to say out loud. When Alan Jackson stops performing, something irreplaceable leaves with him. He was the last of a generation that remembered what country music was before it became country pop. He carried the spirit of George Jones and Merle Haggard and Hank Williams into an era that had largely forgotten them. He wrote songs that told stories, real stories about real people, at a time when the industry was obsessed with hooks and beats and crossover potential. He proved that you could sell 75 million records without compromising who you were. That lesson may be the greatest legacy of all. The voice that will never fade. Alan Jackson once said he never wanted to do the big retirement tour like other artists. He thought it was cheesy. He did not want to drag out the goodbye, milk it for attention, and turn the ending into a spectacle. But fate had other plans. The disease forced his hand. The Last Call tour was not a choice. It was a necessity. And now, as the final notes approach, fans are left to grapple with what his silence will mean. The songs will remain. Chattahoochee will still play at summer barbecues. Remember When will still echo at weddings. Where Were You will still bring tears on every September 11th. The music is immortal in ways that the man who made it cannot be. But there is something else that Alan Jackson leaves behind. Something harder to define, but impossible to ignore. He showed a generation of country artists that you do not have to chase trends to succeed. That honesty and craft and respect for tradition will always find an audience. That the best songs are the ones that tell the truth, even when the truth is painful. The disease may have taken his ability to tour. It may eventually take his ability to perform at all, but it cannot take what he built. It cannot erase 35 years of music that shaped how millions of people understand love, loss, faith, and the American experience. The voice that sang Chattahoochee will go silent, but the song will never stop playing. In his interview with Today, Alan Jackson said something that has stayed with fans ever since. He said the disease would not kill him. It was not deadly, but it would take everything else. His mobility, his balance, his ability to do the thing he loved most in the world. And then he said something that revealed the man behind the legend. He said he just wanted people to know why he looked the way he did. He did not want sympathy. He did not want pity. He just wanted understanding. That humility, that honesty, that refusal to pretend is why Alan Jackson mattered. Not just because of the songs, because of the man who sang them. On June 27, 2026, Nashville will say goodbye to a legend. The stadium will be packed. The stars will shine. The music will fill the night sky. And somewhere in that crowd, there will be fans who heard Chattahoochee for the first time as teenagers. Fans who danced to Livin' on Love at their weddings. Fans who cried to Remember When as they buried their parents. All of them gathered one last time to say thank you to the man who gave them the soundtrack of their lives. What Alan Jackson song means the most to you? And if this story touched your heart, so we can keep honoring the legends who shaped country music forever.